Hello, everybody. Welcome to our podcast, Everything Product. So, we talk about the latest technologies with a product mindset. I'm Sid Saladi. I work as a product manager for Best Buy.
Hi everyone, this is Funny Muyuru. I'm a product manager at a startup.
Hey everyone, I'm Srinath. I work as a product manager in a Seattle based company.
Okay, so today we are going to talk about user needs. So everybody, right? You must have watched a lot of different videos on user needs, but most of the videos talk about just a high level method of how do you gather user needs and create products and all of that stuff. For this video, we're going to go a level deeper and try to understand how user needs vary from company to company, right? If it's a B2C company, it's different. If it's a B2B company, there's a different way of doing it. And also, when first time product managers go out gathering user needs, they do a lot of mistakes, and they kind of go to the users asking them what they need and all of that stuff are. We are also going to talk about what are the best practices of doing these customer interviews and all of that stuff. So let's dig deep and get deeper into what user needs are, how to gather user needs. So we'll start with a very quick question here. So why do we need to gather user needs, Funny?
Definitely, Sidhu. So let me start with the example that I've seen with Ford, right? Imagine a world where there were no cars, and then let's say you go to a customer who is using a horse and then ask them, hey, what do you need? They'll typically tell that, hey, I need a faster horse because they want to go from point A to point B, and the current product that they have in front of their mind is a horse. But if we have tried to build a faster horse, we would have gone in a completely wrong tangent. But actually solving the customer problem basically is he wants to go from point A to point B and he wanted to go as fast as possible. Ford went in the right way and then building a car. That's what I see as a difference here, right? A lot of product managers typically go to a customer and ask, hey, what do you want? The customer will have their own vision and they'll tell that, hey, this is the feature, this is the product they want. Product managers will go to the engineering team and say, hey, this is exactly the feature that the customer want. Go ahead and build it. But the pitfall there is once you build it, you might understand that, hey, this is not what exactly the customer want. There might be a faster, easier, and better approachable feature or a product that you could have built for the customer. And that's why we need to understand clearly what exactly is the customer problem and the user need, rather than understanding the user feature or a user or a feature that a product or a feature customer asks for. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a
I'll edit
very,
that.
very, yeah, I think that's on point, Funny. So whenever you're gathering user needs, right, asking that customer like what we want to build is like the absolute biggest mistake which you could do, right? And also maybe asking users pointed questions or questions that are biased towards a specific output could lead you towards something which the customer wouldn't want, and wouldn't be interested in using. So I think that's
Yeah,
where we say that user needs are more like an art than a process of getting gathering inputs from the users. So you had
yeah,
something,
sure.
Srinath?
No, that's a pretty good example that Funny shared. I mean, yeah, I think it's important to ask not ask opinion based questions like asking the question that Funny was talking about, rather understanding that
If you have any questions regarding user needs or how to gather user needs, please mention it in the comment section. We try to respond to every comment in the comment section.
customer pain point and figuring out what that user need is so we can design a solution based on that is pretty important, rather than just say asking, oh, what do you think about this, what do you want.
Yeah, that's right. So, let's maybe start with the process here, right? Like when you are even before you are even going out to gathering user needs and all, right? Like what would be your starting point? The first thing is trying to figure out what your target customer is, right? And then figure out like what the questions you are going to ask your target customer. So, Funny, can you give us more inputs on like how do you go by that process and what do you do?
Yeah, absolutely, Sidhu. So the very first and most important thing, like you mentioned, is understanding who is your targeted customer. Because you might be working on a product that could be catering to like small businesses, or you could be working on a product that's focused on mid market or enterprise. And based on the customer, the needs of them varies a lot. And even within the company, you clearly need to understand who is the customer persona that is actually performing that task. I'm gonna give you a very brief example, right? Let's say you go to an enterprise customer and ask them, hey, what do you need? And if you're asking a manager for that product rather than the operations team who is actually doing the task, the manager is going to focus completely on like insights and several other things rather than the operator who actually wants the specific buttons to do something. So you clearly need to define and understand who is your targeted customer and go and talk to that person specifically rather than going to a generic person who is working on that company or working on the product and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and also, the way which you conduct an interview for user needs changes based on the type of the product you're working with, right? If it's a B2C product, the process might be completely different. When it comes to a B2B product, the process might be even different, right? So when we look at a B2C company, there could be millions of customers who are you already using the product, and you kind of have some sort of data on how they are actually navigating through the product and all of that stuff. Take the example of a B2B company, right? Where the number of people who are using it could be from 100 to thousands, like, and it is sometimes you might not get the right amount of data looking at how the people are interacting with it. Maybe you have to uh, go one step further to conduct interviews with these people when it's a B2B product, and it varies by also the stage of the product, right? Imagine a product which is not out there yet, right? Like, what is the customer even what is the context the customer even has, right? So there's the way you gather user needs is completely different from a product which doesn't exist to a product which all exists and people are using it. So there are a lot of different variations to this and all of that. Any thoughts, Srinath?
Yeah, I mean, on the B2B side, I mean, have a lot of experience working with customers there. So in both Amazon business as well as at Twilio. So B2B, I mean, it's slightly different as you guys were talking about earlier. So B2B, I mean, in addition to gathering the customer needs through interviews, and we visit also their offices and various personas like marketing, accounts payable administrators, finance, and all that stuff to understand individual needs so we can design a product that meets their needs. One example which I can give you is when we were trying to create different roles within an Amazon business account, everyone's feature requests are different, the needs are different. There, for instance, an accounts payable administrator would like access to a number of different reconciliation and all that stuff, versus a general administrator would not require access to reporting. Again, I'm just making this up, but again, everyone's needs are different, so it's pretty important to understand from B2B space. Even if it's a one business, within the business there will be multiple personas that you need to take into consideration. In addition to these interviews, we also closely work with a lot of our customer facing teams, like solution architects, the customer success managers, the sales teams, and all that stuff, who daily work with customers in their account management. Given they're very close to the customer complexities, needs, and all that stuff, especially solution architects will play a pretty big role, because these teams work with the customers in integrating our services. So it's pretty important to understand what those I mean, requirements are. So we closely collaborate with them as well in doing that. And the third thing which we also done in the past is, I mean, conducting business summits. So we often did like once a quarter business summits where we bring like a stakeholder or a persona from each company, and we bring them to Seattle to just have a an informal discussion to understand, I mean, what their needs are, as well as talk about our product features and understand the pain points from their own shoes. That really helps to understand the pain points from their own shoes and how we could build better products. So these were some of the things that we have done in the past. So yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's a
Nice.
very important, a good point, Srinath. So, when you do individual customer interviews, you might get a lot of good data, but that's also a lot of work to set up these interviews and have one-on-one meetings with people, debrief all the pain points from that, and gather them and club them together. there's the other way of doing it, where you said, right, having a summit might be like a thing which you get all of these people together and do it in a much shorter time than doing the individual setup. So as we are talking, right, there are multiple ways of gathering user needs, and one way of doing that would be this way. So Srinath, I would want to also ask you, right, like if you were to give 5 or 6 steps of what the process is at the previous company which you are working at, right? So what would they be, right? Like what would you start with and what would you end with, and how does the whole loop look like?
Yeah, so our process typically starts first. Once we figure out what the problem that we are trying to solve, we try to collaborate with our customer success teams in finding out who the potential customers are who may be looking for that, like a feature or something around that. So that makes it little easy for us to find the right customer and it's more get feedback for more targeted customer rather than going to some random customer asking an open-ended question. So that is the first thing that I do. I collaborate with our sales teams to get in touch with the customer. Set up time with them to understand the pain points from their own shoes. So once I set up that, I try to talk to the customer, get their feedback and all that stuff based on the questions I design. I capture everything. Then we go back and make sure we validate that with the pain points, because there'll be so many different teams, especially in the B2B world, like customer success manager, sales, professional services, customer support. So we are not just looking from one angle, but looking at the data points from multiple teams to make sure this is also aligned with the in general, like, customer expectations. So once I go do that, I go and figure out what those needs are, then figure out basically the prioritization, what those needs are. Once I define the P0, P1, P2 based on a consistent framework, I take that and work with our engineering teams in developing that, because that really helps the teams that we have done enough research, we have prioritized based on the right mixture of data analysis, and we have a clear path of what the user stories are, what the acceptance criteria and all that stuff, and go and implement. And obviously once we do that, we want to make sure we validate with customers as well. So I go back to the customer basically to make sure this is what they are looking for rather than what we think is right, because sometimes we can interpret differently. So that validation really helps to close the loop.
Yeah. So I think that's also an interesting way of doing things, right? Like each company does it a different way. How about you, Funny? So what was your experience doing this, and what were the different steps you would actually follow to get through this process?
Very, very similar, Sidhu. But before we go to the customer itself, right, the very first thing that we try to understand is what could be the problem that we are tackling. So we also start with the overall company and the product level goals, right? So let's take this quarter into consideration, right? Let's say I want to make sure my product is exceptionally reliable for the customers. Then I have a clear thought process in mind to say, hey, let's probably understand from a reliability standpoint, what are the issues that the customers are facing? Maybe they're clicking a button and something is failing within that. So I would try to like focus or at least set a context in that direction for the customer, and then try to identify the customers catering to that. There could be data play here as well. We might be able to get some customers based on their comments and stuff that they give as well. So do a lot of like pre-analysis on what you want to tackle before you find the customers and research about the customers. That's probably one big addition that I'll add to what the process that Srinath told. But after that, very similar, like get the customer, talk to them. Don't give a direction to the customer, but rather keep it focused on the overall thought process. Overall goal that you have in mind, but don't give them a direction to say, hey, especially exactly here, what will happen and stuff. Then once you clearly understand their pain points or the needs, then go into design sessions, creating the designs, going back to the customer feedback, etc., etc. One primary tip that I want to give here for product managers is have rock stars. Have rock stars for everything. So let me explain what I mean by that. So let's say you're a B2B company and you're trying to design or build products for another business. Have your top 5 rockstar businesses. Anything that you launch, again, depends on the customer persona, but anything that you launch, make sure to give it to those 5 customers first, and make sure to build a very strong relationship with them so that they can give you a very clear feedback on what is good and what is bad. Same thing, do it with your customer success representatives or CSMs. Have your top 5 rock stars, and anytime you want to learn something, they should be happy to talk to you. Hey, Fun is my awesome product manager. If he's coming and giving me something, I would love to give some feedback. So have your rock stars in every direction like that. Even if it's a B2C, try to have few rockstar customers who you can easily reach out to and say, dude, I'm trying to do this. What do you think? That'll help you a lot.
Yeah, that's a great tip. One thing which I would like to add on top of that, one thing which I've also tried in the past is setting up like a quarterly informal roundtables between our teams and these different sales teams to talk about our product updates, industry updates, talk about, I mean, the pain points from their own shoes and get their feedback as well. More of an informal conversation because it's not always about work. That really helped to think through, oh, okay. I mean, customers are looking for some this. Competitors have this. We don't have this. I mean, that also gives another lens. And we identified few rock stars like that you mentioned from different teams who are pretty vocal, who are always interested and want to solve customer problems. Those give really good feedback. That really helps us to make sure we're building the right product.
So, so how does these roundtables look like? Right? Is it you conducting it, facilitating it, and you having all of the subject matter experts or stakeholders part of the roundtable, and you is that going through a discussion guide, or is it just like a informal conversation?
We set up a structure. I mean, I feel basically I built that process with a template of kind of what that structure looks like. So it's primarily between the product and these different sales teams, as well as few engineering leaders, not to overwhelm all the engineers, but just engineering leaders to basically understand the industry updates and what probably industry updates. That's where you learn about all the competitors, what they're doing, and all that stuff, and also talk about our product features that we are thinking of. I mean, when we talk about something which is pretty in nascent, or also which is in flight, I mean, that really helps to get the first level feedback before we go and build, I mean, something big. So yeah, it's a basically structure and conversation between these two, but primarily product, engineering, and GTM stakeholders.
Yeah. Are you a product manager who uses a different method of gathering user needs? Mention in the comment section below. Can you walk us through how do you do user needs for a B2C product?
Definitely, Sidhu. So, as a B2C product, right, the biggest issue that we would face is you would have millions of customers with, you would probably have like millions of customers with very wide range of customer personas. So, if that is the scenario, it's very tough for you to gather all the needs for those customers and trying to prioritize. So, my biggest recommendation is basically creating a learning plan. And a learning plan is nothing but a bunch of hypotheses that you would pre-write as a plan to see, hey, these are all the things that I want to learn. And these might not be the features that you would build. These could be a data analysis. This could be talking to one customer or like few customer service reps to figure out how they do it. So you add everything to a learning plan and then go figure out what are all those things by looking at data, by talking to few internal customers, by talking to few external customers, etc., and continue to validate them. After you do that, then you narrow down to a specific list of customers who could be using this feature. Then with that narrowed down process, go and talk to those customers in one-on-one interviews. After that, you could be looking at experimentation, basically building a product and then experimenting it to say like, would this segment of customers would be liking this kind of feature or the other one. We have done a big video on the experimentation. I'll link the video here as well. Yep, for anyone who wants to watch it, please go through it. And then the last one I would also say is for anyone who is working on a completely new product, right? Try to identify your leap of faith assumptions. Leap of faith assumptions could dramatically change the direction that you want to take for your product. If a leap of faith assumption goes bad, you might not even be able to like attempt building the product. So a leap of faith assumption basically is something that has never been proven in the industry, and that's something that you wanted to try as well.
Yeah. So I think, like now we have seen like two different processes, right? Srinath was more talking about B2B and Fanny was talking about B2C, right? More of that kind of. So you could see, right? There are a lot of differences between the both the processes, but each process is unique to that company and works for them. So there's no one size fits all, right? You could pick an approach which works best for you. That's the secret. And also, I'd say one important thing which I'd also want to focus on is the goal of what you want to do, right? The goal could be to uncover something that is completely new, or the goal could be to validate a hypothesis which you have, right? I think these could be some different intentions of why you want to do a customer needs interview and process of getting needs or pain points from the customer. Okay, so that's where we kind of debriefed like different things and all, right? So let's maybe walk into a specific process. Funny, so you have a template on how to do it, right? Can you show us and walk us through like what you do with the template while gathering user needs?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely, Sidhu. So let me set a very quick context, right? So this is specifically for B2C products. So in B2C products, a very big problem that we go through is how do we identify the needs of the customer, especially when you have like millions of customers. And there is a very strong framework that I totally believe in is the hypothesis testing, right? So you define a hypothesis and you try to validate a bunch of things that you had a hunch for. So what I mean by that, as a B2C product manager, your biggest weapon is data. So this data could be the actual clicks that the customer is taking, or the data could be the actual feedback that is coming from the customer, be it your reviews that you're getting from Android or iPhone apps and stuff, or be it the NPS surveys and everything that you could take from your product. So taking all of this data, you would definitely have some hunches on what features you would want to build. So the biggest recommendation that I would give to B2C customers or the product managers who are working on B2C products is building a learning plan. So obviously I can't give the details on what I specifically do and stuff, but I'm gonna share a template that I typically follow to create a learning plan.
Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel.
So the biggest recommendation that I would give is a learning plan. So this is a typical format that I follow. If you look at the columns here, right, the first one is understand what phase you are in. Are you doing some kind of a dog food? Dog food is just a terminology here. Dog food is basically a beta test you typically do with your internal employees before you launch it to a customer. So now you have the list of features. Let's take a feature one. Then you write a hypothesis test for it to say, hey, if we give a feature to update X in our product, then our customers will do Y, which we will measure by checking the number of orders. Something like that. This is a typical hypothesis test that you write. And then you will say that, hey, I'll be measuring the success by telling that, hey, there is 5% cancelled orders, etc. You'll have a timeline on when you're planning to do this. Once you're done with the launch, then you'll basically add a result of what exactly happened. Like, let's say you're anticipating 5% lowered cancel orders, but did it actually happen? So whether it happened or not, you will define the corresponding steps based on that. And now these corresponding steps could end up becoming features for your next stages. So you'll continue to improve your learning plan on how you optimize this, and then you will continue to plan for all the hypothesis tests that you want to do at different phases. Once you have this clear thought process in mind, then you will never have surprises. The reason is, even if a hypothesis test didn't work, you would have probably planned for it both a happy path and a failure scenario, and you would have planned for features accordingly in your next phases. So every sprint or every couple of sprints would be an excellent learning for you, and based on the learnings you would be creating the next plan that you want to do for your product. So this is one of the biggest recommendations that I would give for product managers, especially in the B2 space when they don't know what they want to build for their product.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is pretty awesome. It looks like pretty agile way of doing things, right? Which many people do.
Yeah, that's right.
And
So
data
I
based
think
as
that's
well.
also Yep, that's right,
Yes.
Ronnie. So it's also a very good tip, right? If you are not sure what to do while getting some of these things right, use templates. I'd say sometimes these templates can guide you the right way of getting whatever you want to out of the customers, right? Yeah. So I think that was a really good discussion. So maybe let's also talk about something which a lot of product managers in their early careers do, right? So I see there are a lot of pitfalls that you can come across while getting through these user interviews and all of that stuff. Let's talk about like what are the top 5 best practices to do before you get into user interviews and all of that stuff. So I'll give you the top 5 and then we'll dig into each of these things in detail. The first one is right, talk to the right customers, ask good questions, avoid bad questions. The third is keep it casual. Fourth is understand why we the why and also dig deep into the answers which they give. And the final tip is talk less, listen more, right? So let's dig deep into each of these things. Talking about picking the right customer, as everybody, right, we are talking about, right, you want to figure out like what the persona is. But sometimes, right, I see that people don't dig deep enough, right? So there could be some questions which you could ask while defining persona. Spend a lot of time and ask all these questions too. So is the customer you're talking to represent your current user base or a future user base? Is the segment too broad? Can I further segment the user or not? So I think a lot of people stop at a point, but there could be multiple levels down where you can segment the customer and get a more nuanced persona. So that's something you need to watch out for. If you have a too broader of a persona, most of the time you are overwhelmed by the number of options which you get from them. And also, right, you're not sure if you are moving right or no. And there's also a lot of mixed feedback where you end up with a lot of small features than a big problem which you can solve for the customers. So that's number one. Number two, right, ask good questions, avoid bad questions. So the way I would put this is, right, when you go to your mom and ask your mom uh, something which you did right and how does it look, she's like 100% of the time she's like, yeah, I love it, man, it's this is it, this looks great, right? But that's not the customer which you would want to, right? You want a customer which actually talks about what value he wants or what pain point he has and all of that stuff. So I'd say a bad question, I'll give you an example of a bad question, right? um, Imagine you are basically building a day planner app for Alexa, right? And you're talking to Alexa users. A bad question would be, do you think building a day planner app on Alexa is a good idea? Right, that's asking a customer, do you want a car or a faster horse, right? He would want maybe a faster horse that time, right? But a good question would be basically not biasing the customer or pointing him towards a solution, but asking questions around it, right? So a good question could be, how do you plan a regular day? Then he would say, I use certain apps to do it. So that will give you insights of, are they efficient or not, and can you build an app through Alexa which can be efficient? Another question could be, what apps do you use to plan your day? What are you planning while planning your day, right? And what are you planning to achieve while planning your day? And all of these questions. So these could be examples of a good question. So then I think the third most important question is, don't make it too formal that the customer is intimidated and he's kind of not comfortable expressing his view outright. So keep it as casual as possible and keep it in a much friendlier way rather than you interviewing and scrutinizing him on specific questions and all of that stuff. The fourth one is, I think it's always good to dig deep to understand the actual intention of what the customer has in answering the specific questions which he's trying to answer, right? When he mentions that, right, when I'm doing a certain thing, it actually irritates me a lot. Try to understand why does it irritate him a lot, like what could be potential causes for that irritation. So always really good practices, whenever you ask him a question, he gives you an answer, ask 2 or 3 follow-up questions trying to understand the actual problem which he has. So that basically helps you avoid having band-aid fix, and get deeper into understanding what the root cause of the problem is, right? So that's like understand the why and dig deep into what the customer wants. The the final thing is, right, it's not you giving information of what your product is and what you want to do to the customer, but rather than you listening what the customer wants. So shut up and let the customer talk more, right? So talk less and give him an opportunity to talk more. And also sometimes the awkward silence will uh, encourage him to explain himself better, talk more, and all of that stuff. So keep doing that. I would say follow these five to gather needs in a much effective way. Okay, so yeah, I think we discussed a lot of different things, right? Like we, rather than going into the regular mode of how do we go by collecting user needs, what is the generic process, we talked about how we are going into doing customer needs for different kinds of products, different companies, and also we talked about the pitfalls and all. So if I were to ask you both, right, what are your two takeaways from the discussion which we had? What would that be? Maybe I'll start with Srinath.
Yeah, I mean, so my two tips for all the aspiring product managers or product managers out there is understand the pain point from their own shoes rather than asking directly opinion based questions. So that's pretty important. So you're figuring out the exact user needs and designing a product. And second, understand I mean the persona of the customer, and that can change like widely depending on the different business types, whether it is B2B or B2C that Funny and myself talked about in this call. So it varies widely. The strategies that you leverage as well to gather user needs can be different. So it's pretty important to understand the personas as well as type of business that you're gathering. So these are the two things that I would like to share. Anything you would like to add, Funny?
Yeah. So I know we speak about customer a lot. That's the zero, I would say. When I say zero, like that's the ground level. You have to do it. But my two big takeaways for anyone who's watching this, the first one is data. Data is your biggest weapon as a product manager. So focus a lot on all of the different data types that you would get, and then try to find meaningful outcome of what a customer would need. And the second one that I would tell is based on what you identify, create a detailed learning plan of what you want to do. That would teach you a lot, and then that would give you a path of how you want to expand your product down the line.
So my biggest takeaway I have would be start with a goal, right? Like know what you want to achieve to get through this process, right? Either it being understanding the user needs, testing a hypothesis, or validating any assumptions you have, right? All of these things. So start with a goal, and while doing the interviews, right? As you do more and more interviews, I think you will get accustomed in understanding the actual needs and getting digging deep into what it is and all of that stuff. So practice doing it. The more times you do it, the better you get at uncovering the user needs, and which is the ultimate superpower for a product manager, right? You basically trying to understand what gives value to the customer and then putting it into your product. So focus on these key areas that will help you build really good products, become a good product manager, and satisfy your customers. Okay, so yeah, very good conversation, guys. So I think this was a much deeper dive into what user needs are. And if anybody who hasn't watched our previous user needs videos, we'll give it on the top. Please click the links to watch those. That will give you a very high level overview of what your user needs are, what are the types of user needs, and all of that stuff. Thank you. Thanks.